All right. Good morning, all. We'll be getting started in a few minutes. Well, thanks for being here. Yes, as my colleague Anna said, while we're waiting, please let us know where you're from. So if you can put a note in the chat, welcome. I see somebody from OTI, DCWP, DOF, Finance, IT. Great. Welcome. I'm Debbie from OLR. BWS. What is BWS? I'm not familiar with that acronym. We have law. Welcome, Alfredo. Welcome, correction. DEP. Upstate. Great. Welcome. DOB, Bureau of Water Supply. Thank you so much. And there's a few of you. That's terrific. Department of Education. Welcome. Welcome. Good to have you all here. We have HRA in the house. Couple of HRA. ACS. I'm not counting, but we're getting past my fingers of the number of agencies represented. OCME, the Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Health and Hospitals. Welcome. Let's give it 1 or 2 more minutes and then we can get started. Good day, H&H. Welcome. So happy to have you all here. 'Tis the season, beautiful fall weather, new school, new applications for loans. Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement, welcome. Anyone? Oh, Campaign Finance Board, welcome. DOB, OTI, DOC, OCME, DEP, Law, Finance. Terrific. Good afternoon. We're asking folks to drop in the chat what agency you're from, so we have a sense of the diversity of our audience. As Anna just put in, we'll be recording the webinar, so the slides and the recording will be sent to you and other resources. Good morning, HPD, Parks, DOE, Department of Health, DOH, DCAS, welcome. OMB, Office of Climate Justice, DEP, DOT, NYCHA, Fire. Great. Well, it's wonderful to have you all here. Office of Contracts, very important. Love having all of you here. We're the ones who make the city run. So thank you. DDC, welcome. All right. Do we think we should get started? It's now 12:02. Okay, we got a lot of thumbs up. Let's go. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Debbie Friedman. I'm Assistant Commissioner for Workforce Engagement and Innovation at the Mayor's Office of Labor Relations. And part of my responsibility is overseeing WorkWell NYC, the worksite wellness program for all of you and all of us. And we're really excited to bring to you today what's new with the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA. The 2024 edition, very critical because as we will hear, there's been changes. And I know for me, having had 2 kids graduate from college, this was always a stressful time. So I'm really glad to be able to bring this to you today. I mentioned who I am. I'm also joined by excellent speakers who are incredibly knowledgeable. our colleagues, Haiti Cabasura from the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. Haiti is the Director of Policy and Research in the Office of Financial Empowerment. We also have with us Brendan Williams, the Vice President of Knowledge from U Aspire, and Kara Bradley, the Senior Program Officer of Policy in the Office of Financial Empowerment, also from the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. So we thank you so much for being here and lending your expertise. Again, WorkWell is the worksite wellness program for our New York City employees. We are here to help you help yourself be the healthiest that you can be. We know that most of us spend much of our waking hours at work. And so we want to leverage the worksite as a place to bring you education, services, awareness programs, and to help give you information and get you access to experts like we're doing here today. So we're really excited to get started. I'm sorry, I forgot to send our bucket. So some of the areas that WorkWell does our work in includes all of our physical activity and our Move More digital fitness classes live in person. Hopefully some of you, and you can put it in the chat if you participated in our STEP challenge. We also have our Eat Well programming all around nutrition, helping to help us know the right things to eat, when to eat it, and how to do so. And so hopefully some of you have participated in our 5-a-day and other challenges. We also have our Take Action, which is our prevention bucket. Hopefully many of you are participating in our flu clinic. We know almost 4,000 people had gotten their flu shots just this past 2 months. And hopefully you are amongst those, or if not, you'll take advantage as we move forward. Great, we have lots of exercise participants. Our Be Well bucket that helps with mental wellness and resilience, where we have both live in-person events, digital, yoga, meditation, stress management, stress busters, a whole host of resources that you'll get access to at the end. And finally, our Project Build, which addresses our health equity, under which this program is a part of, so that we recognize getting access to information to support the financial health of our employees is critical. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Haiti Cabasura. Love hearing all the support for WorkWell, and I'll turn it over to Haiti. Thank you, Haiti.
Oh, thanks, Deb, and the WorkWell team for your collaboration. I appreciate the introduction and our opportunity for the Office of Financial Empowerment to speak today. So the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, you may know us by our former name, DCA, protects and enhances the daily economic lives of New Yorkers to create thriving communities. We look to pioneer the way that city government can protect and enhance the lives of all players in the marketplace, including consumers, businesses, and workers, and how that work ultimately fosters stronger, more sustainable, and thriving communities. The Office of Financial Empowerment's mission is to educate, empower, and protect New Yorkers with low income so they can build assets and make the most of their financial resources. You may have seen our subway ads for one program, New York City Free Tax Prep. Certainly in October with the sun shining, tax season seems very far away, but it's not. So this winter, you can have your taxes filed for free at more than 150 IRS certified tax sites across the city. And we're going to speak a little bit later about our other leading program, the Financial Empowerment Centers. Next slide. So for today's webinar topics, I'm really excited that we'll be talking about FAFSA, which Deb referenced, and some other resources for higher education financial planning. And we'll have Q&A. And just a quick note that we love your questions. So while we do have a dedicated section for Q&A with our experts at the end of this, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom. And just to note that we do sometimes group questions together on a similar topic. So your individual questions might appear as a grouped question at the end. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Brendan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. we are going to talk about the FAFSA today and do a very brief overview of the FAFSA. We're going to talk about what it is, who needs it, why it's important, some key FAFSA steps, and what you can do after submitting the FAFSA. I do encourage you to ask questions throughout. I've already replied to a few questions that have come in. While I'm speaking, I won't be able to reply to those questions, but once I'm done speaking, I'll try and answer via the Q&A feature, but then also I will still be here at the end to answer any Q&A that comes in. So You Aspire is a national nonprofit that aims to improve the economic mobility of underrepresented students by helping them navigate the financial aid process. And so we work with students across the country to fill out the FAFSA, CSS profile, do all those other steps you need to do to get financial aid for college. So in terms of the FAFSA, what is it? So the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. You can complete it at FAFSA.gov. They say it will take about an hour to complete. This varies based on you and your experiences, your family circumstances, who else needs to provide information on the FAFSA. I've seen some students take 10 minutes. I've seen other students take an hour. This year, the 25-26 FAFSA opens December 1st. It should return to opening October 1st in future years. That is the hope. We'll talk about why that is and why it has a delayed launch this year, as it had a delayed launch last year as well. And the FAFSA does two main things. It determines eligibility for federal financial aid, and then states and colleges also use the information that is provided on the FAFSA to distribute their financial aid funds. And so those are the key things that the FAFSA does. So we're going to launch a poll here to just identify why you want to learn more about the FAFSA. So why are you interested in learning about the FAFSA? Do you need to submit the FAFSA for yourself? Do you need to submit the FAFSA for a child or someone else? Or do you not really need to submit the FAFSA, but you want to learn more about it? You're just interested in knowing more in terms of how it works. And so we'll give you all a minute to reply, and then we'll just sort of, and this helps give me a way to sort of tailor the responses. So what it looks like, the majority of folks here need to submit the FAFSA for a child or someone else. Some folks are here to submit it for themselves, and others are here just to learn more. So this is sort of what I expected, but it'll help me tailor how I talk about the FAFSA as we go through the rest of these. So in terms of who should complete the FAFSA, for students who plan to attend an eligible degree or certificate program, whether it's undergraduate or graduate, and whether it's certificate or bachelor's for undergraduate, I would recommend completing the FAFSA. There are sometimes folks say, well, I don't know if I'll be eligible for any financial aid. And my response is the only way you know if you're eligible or not eligible is to apply and see what they're willing to give you. And there are certain requirements that must be met to complete the FAFSA. So U.S. citizens or national eligible non-citizens, students from freely associated states can complete the FAFSA. For undocumented students and students who have DACA, they can't complete the FAFSA, but New York State aid may be available via the New York State DREAM Act. And so they should also check with their intended school to see what documents they require. So there is an important piece of knowing if you're eligible to complete the form or not. And then why complete the FAFSA is that you can get financial aid. And that could include grants and scholarships. That is like the most popular form of financial aid, right? But it also includes loans and work study. And so loans like the direct subsidized and unsubsidized loan. In order for parents to get access to a PLUS loan, their child must have completed the FAFSA. And also work study, which is basically working on campus, usually on campus. It can be off campus. But some of that funding is provided by the federal government. My example, I did a work study job. I was an equipment manager for the athletic teams. So I washed a lot of laundry. I fetched a lot of soccer balls, but they can also be in a library or other things. But these are all considered different types of financial aid. And so let's talk briefly about what happened with last year's FAFSA. You may have seen there were a million different news articles about it. There was a lot of stuff going on. And so there was some legislation passed, the FAFSA Simplification Act, along with, as part of the Consolidation Appropriations Act, that basically required there to be changes made to the FAFSA. The implementation of those changes occurred with the 24-25 FAFSA, which was the FAFSA that opened up at the end of December last year. And the implementation of those changes led to some challenges for students, families, and colleges. And so there was the delayed launch. So there were fewer months to fill out the FAFSA. There were technical glitches in the form. So all of the changes they had to make there ended up being some technical glitches due to those changes. And there were issues processing the FAFSAs at the federal level, but then at the college level as well. And colleges weren't getting that information on time. Currently, for the 25-26 FAFSA, the federal student aid and the education department are doing a beta testing period. And so they're opening up the FAFSA for small groups of students so that they can fill it out and see what issues there are so that they can try and avoid the issues that were experienced with the 24-25 FAFSA. And so they're going through a rigorous testing period to try and avoid the issues that we're seeing last year for 25-26. All right, so that's a brief intro to the FAFSA, what happened last year. Now let's talk about some key FAFSA steps. So there are some things you need to know / have to complete the FAFSA. So you need an FSA ID. You need to know what your dependency status is if you're filling it out for yourself or if you're helping a child with it, their dependency status. And this is a list of things we're going to dive a little bit deeper in the next couple of slides. You need to know contributor information. So anyone who needs to provide information on the FAFSA is considered a contributor. Income and tax information, asset information, and the colleges to include. We have a FAFSA checklist available on our website for free if you use this QR code, if you go there after this webinar. This just helps you gather all the information needed to fill out the FAFSA. It's also available in, I think, 6 or 7 other languages as well on the UAspire website. All right, if we can go to the next slide. So what is an FSA ID? An FSA ID is a username and password that you use to access the FAFSA, and it serves as your legal signature. If you are older like me, you might remember the legal signature as being a 4-digit PIN that you would enter on the FAFSA. Or maybe you signed the paper FAFSA and sent that in. But they changed that to be a username and password that anyone who needs to provide information on the FAFSA needs. So if all contributors need an FSA ID, for a dependent student, they'll need one, and then a parent will need one. For an independent student, they would need one, and if they're married, their spouse would need one. And each person can only have one FSA ID. It is associated with your social security number, if you have one. It can only be associated with one phone number and one email address, and you can't use those to create another one. And it is required to be able to complete the FAFSA. If you don't have a social, they've made it so you can also create an FSA ID. This started with the 24-25 FAFSA, and it requires some additional information. In terms of dependency, so if you're an independent student in the FAFSA, that means no parent information is required. If you're dependent, that means parent information is required. So these boxes on this slide show reasons why a student would be considered independent. So if they will be 24 by January 1st of the award year, if they're married, an emancipated minor, have a court-ordered legal guardian, have children or other people who live with them and receive over half their support from the student, those are examples of when they'd be considered independent. What I'll say is like the most common thing we see is students who turn 18 and say, I'm 18, so I'm independent. On the FAFSA, that is not the case. As you can say, they'll have to be 24 by January 1st of the award year, if that's the only thing that they qualify for. So if one of these things is true on this page, you can be considered independent on the FAFSA. And then who is a parent on the FAFSA? And so this is a topic of conversation that we cover a lot of times. It can be confusing depending on what is going on. So if parents are legally married, regardless of opposite or same sex, information for both parents is required on the form. If parents are not married to each other and live together, you have to report information for both parents. And by parents, I mean biological or adoptive parents. If parents are not living together, you have to report information for the parent that provided more financial support in the last 12 months. And so if that's equal, you would actually you'd report the parent with a greater income or assets on the form with the student. And then if a parent is married or remarried to a step parent, you'd have to report information for both the parent and the step parent on the FAFSA. If parents are divorced or separated, just to make a note, and they're not remarried, then only one parent would need to provide that information. It would be the parent who contributes more financially over the last 12 months. For contributors on the FAFSA, and so that's students, and if they're required, parents, everyone is required to consent on the FAFSA. And consent can be a scary thing. Like, what do you even mean by consent? Basically, when you consent on the FAFSA, it's saying, hey, you can grab my information from the IRS and transfer it over to the FAFSA. This is needed to calculate your eligibility for federal aid. It also, if it works, and if they're able to grab your information from the IRS, it will decrease the amount of tax information that you must report manually on the form. It is required for you to consent on the FAFSA, whether or not you filed taxes or not, because they want to check to see if you have. And so consent is a required part of the process, but it does help make the process a lot easier to fill the form out. And then after you consent, most of the tax and income questions will be answered automatically and you won't see them. There will be a few that you are required to answer still that they're not able to transfer. If you need to manually enter tax information, there are certain circumstances where you definitely will have to. If you filed foreign tax returns, if you filed married filing jointly in 2023 but are no longer married to that spouse, you'd have to manually report information. And then if you didn't file taxes, it's going to ask you why you didn't. And so one of those answers is because I didn't earn enough to file taxes. But there are a number of different options there that you can select. Each page has help text that can help you find any information you need to report in the FAFSA. And so if you're at a question, you're filling out the form, and you say, what does this even mean? Check to see if there's a question mark that you can click that'll open up some help text that will provide guidance, even listing the exact line in the tax form that you need to pull information from. All right, so in terms of assets on the FAFSA, and I know there are a lot of questions about assets coming in the Q&A, and we'll definitely make sure to address each of those when we get to the end. So assets are an important piece of calculating what is your student aid index. So once you get to the end of the FAFSA, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that gives you a number that is basically helping determine your eligibility for federal aid. In the asset section, you'll see a question about child support received. This is because they didn't have anywhere else to put it, so they plugged in this question here. And so you have to report the total amount received in the last complete calendar year if there is child support being received. If not, you can leave this question blank and move on. You also ask for the cash savings and checking amounts. In terms of assets, what it's asking you to do is report the value as of the day you fill out the FAFSA. And so what that means is you don't have to go back in and change it every time you pay a bill or anything like that. It's as of the day you fill it out. In terms of businesses, farms, and investments, and we'll get into a little bit more what counts and doesn't count as an investment, you're reporting the net worth as of the day you fill out the FAFSA. So basically, it's the value minus any debt on that asset. And so let's say you have a rental property, and it's valued at $300,000, but you have a mortgage of $200,000. You would take the value that you could sell it for, subtract the mortgage, and it would be, you'd report a net worth of $100,000. And so that is how they're asking you to calculate that net worth for businesses, farms, and investments. So in terms of what counts as an investment and what doesn't, I'm going to focus on the what should not be reported. So you do not report home in which the student or parents live. So their primary residence, you do not report. You do not report the value of any life insurance policies or any retirement plans. Any accounts for which the student parent are the custodian, but not the owner. And then 529 accounts with the beneficiary other than the student's applicant. And this is a big change from FAFSA, previous FAFSAs, is you used to have to report 529 accounts for any children. And so you'd have to report all of that information. They've now said you only need to report the 529 account for the student whose FAFSA you're filling out in the asset section. So things that do count. So real estate beyond the home that you live in, rental property, trust funds, money market funds, mutual funds, certificates of deposit, bonds, stock options. One of the key things that I always also like to call out is when I've worked with families, they said, well, we have all our money in cash, so like we don't need to report that. The question asking about checking and savings accounts also says cash as well. And so it is a part of the requirement in the asset section that even if it's not in an official account, it does need to be reported there. All right, so that was a very brief overview of the FAFSA. We didn't want to dive too deep into the details. Let's talk about what happens after you submit the FAFSA. So once you submit the FAFSA, it's going to take a few days to process, and then you're going to get access to a FAFSA submission summary. And this basically is exactly what it sounds like. It summarizes the information that was reported on the FAFSA. It provides estimated financial aid eligibility. It provides a student aid index. It will flag if corrections need to be made if you've been selected for a verification. It's also a time to sort of check over everything and see, do any colleges need to be added? Is there anything that we reported by accident here? And so it's really important to check over that. And we have some videos on how to retrieve and review the FAFSA submission summary from studentaid.gov. One key thing, if you are a parent submitting this for your child is going to get access. So they should log in with their FSA ID and they'll get access to the FAFSA submission summary. You will have limited ability from your own studentaid.gov account, from the parent studentaid.gov account, to get access to this information. So let's talk about SAI a little bit. So for those who have been filling out the FAFSA for a couple of years, or maybe had older children go to college, you used to know this as EFC, the expected family contribution. They've changed the terminology and changed the calculation a little bit, but in essence, it works the same way. It's a number that the colleges and the federal government and state governments use to determine your eligibility for certain types of financial aid. It can be as low as negative 1,500. But having a negative 1,500 SAI doesn't necessarily make you eligible for more financial aid. So if you have an SAI of 0 or an SAI of negative 1,500, you're still eligible for the same amount of Pell Grant, which is a federal grant from the federal government that you can use at an eligible college. It is determined by family size, income, and assets. And so they look at that across everyone who's listed on the FAFSA and calculate your SAI. They use it as a measure of financial need. And so it is not the exact amount of money you have to pay for college. And most families need to pay more than their SAI for college. It is just a number that helps determine your eligibility for different types of financial aid. So in terms of some FAFSA resources, we have a financial aid checklist, an FSA ID guide, a FAFSA checklist. We also offer financial aid walkthroughs for students. A lot of parents also attend those, and so we have different topics such as the FAFSA CSS profile, how to review your financial aid offers when the time's right. There also are some federal student aid resources. So there's the federal aid estimator, which if you want to know what your SAI might be, that's a great tool to use. There is also a Who's My Parent tool that'll help you determine which contributors need to be listed on the FAFSA. These QR codes will take you to U Aspire student resources page, and then also our YouTube page where we have a ton of videos on specific questions on the FAFSA on how to answer those. All right, well, thank you for diving into the FAFSA with me. I'm going to hand it back over, and I'm going to try and answer some questions in the Q&A before we get to the end of our time.
Thanks, Brendan. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to highlight some other resources for higher education financial planning now. So first, we wanted to highlight the New York City Financial Empowerment Centers. So these centers offer free one-on-one financial coaching to help you reach your goals. So anyone who lives or works in New York City and is 18 years or older can schedule an appointment. So you can book an appointment online at nyc.gov/talkmoney, or you can call 311 and say financial counseling. So how can financial empowerment centers help? A few ways. So first, financial counselors can help you specifically with college and grad school expenses by helping you create a budget, lowering your student loan monthly payments, exploring loan forgiveness options. But they can also help you more generally by helping you manage debt, building and improving your credit, saving and planning for the future, and a lot more. So we encourage you to schedule an appointment if you're interested. So another resource that we want to highlight is Public Service Loan Forgiveness, PSLF for short. And this is a federal loan forgiveness program for full-time employees of government and nonprofit organizations. So how does PSLF work? So you'll make 120 qualifying monthly payments. This is 10 years under an accepted repayment plan for federal loans and work full-time for an eligible employer. And the city of New York is an eligible employer. You'll then apply for PSLF and your remaining direct loan balance will be forgiven. And I'll note that these 120 or 10 years of public service, this is cumulative, not consecutive. So you can work at a nonprofit organization for 4 years, go to work in the private sector, but then come back and work, let's say, for government for another 6 years, and that cumulative 10 years will be eligible. And to date, the average amount of PSLF for a New York State resident is over $61,000. So this is a really impactful program for public servants. So how do you apply for PSLF? So we recommend using the PSLF help tool as your first step. And this is available on the Federal Student Aid FSA website. And it typically takes less than 30 minutes. So a few things that you should know about applying for PSLF. First, you must still be working for a qualifying employer at the time that you submit your PSLF form for forgiveness upon 10 years of public service. The PSLF help tool available on the FSA website has 5 steps, and you need to complete it in 1 session. And then finally, your employer will need to certify the form for you to qualify for loan forgiveness, which happens after 120 qualifying payments or 10 years. So finally, another resource that's available for full-time City of New York employees is the Mayor's Graduate Scholarship Program. And so this provides full or partial scholarships for graduate study at participating college and universities. And scholarships are awarded through a competitive process, and the application period opens in the fall annually. So it is open now. And the deadline for this year is Friday, November 15th, 2024. And you can find more information and learn who your agency personnel office is on the Mayor's Graduate Scholarship Program website. And we've provided additional resources here based on the information I just talked about, and we will share the slides to all webinar registrants and attendees, so you'll have access to these. So now I think we'll open it up for Q&A.
I just wanted to mention, also, I saw there were some additional questions. Thank you, Kara and Brendan, for your incredible knowledge. I saw that there were some questions about PSLF. So as mentioned in the chat, and Kara mentioned, the recording of this event as well as the slides will be shared with you. We will also make sure to include the recording from PSLF specific webinars, one that was done this past summer, and then we have from the past in previous years, since this has been a hot topic, and we know that many city workers have benefited significantly from that. So I know that Brendan and others have been actively doing the Q&A in answering the Q&A. I'm just going to go to the chat to see. I know there was a question. I wonder if on PSLF, Kara, if you could just again remind people what it is and what makes one eligible for PSLF.
Sure. So it's a federal loan forgiveness program, and it's eligible to full-time public sector or nonprofit employees, and you'll need to make 120 qualifying payments on your direct federal student loans. This amounts to 10 years. And you'll also need to work at a qualifying employer when you apply for forgiveness. So typically this looks like joining a public service organization and certifying your employment annually for 10 years. And upon those 10 years of qualifying payments, applying for forgiveness.
Okay, thank you. And
I
obviously
might
the
just
utility fee.
support that answer, Kara, with just noting that the loans that are eligible for PSLF are direct loans. So they are typically noted with direct subsidized loan, direct plus loans. So those are eligible. And one question that came up in the Q&A is if parents are eligible for PSLF. And the answer is generally no, unless you have a direct plus loan. So a parent plus loan, in which case then you can consolidate into an eligible direct loan, and then you may be eligible for PSLF. So I just wanted to answer that question that came up.
I'm trying to go through the questions. Somebody asked if they applied for FAFSA 10 years ago, are they eligible to apply again?
Yeah, so the FAFSA is an annual form that needs to be filled out. Granted, there are limits to sort of Pell eligibility and how much Pell you can receive. And so there's a number of factors that go in, but yes, you can fill out a FAFSA form every year. Just because you fill out a FAFSA 10 years ago does not mean you can't fill it out this upcoming year or in the future.
There was a question about how does a parent lower their EFC?
Yeah, so I responded to like that is a very difficult question to answer. We're not really in the business of trying to manipulate anything regarding the FAFSA. Information needs to be reported as it's asked for. If there are certain financial circumstances that change from one year to the next, and let's say, I'll give an example here. Let's say that you have a bunch of money in a savings account that's actually designated for a house expense, like replacing a roof. You could potentially appeal to the college and say, hey, these are the assets I had to report in the FAFSA, but I actually had to use that for this house expense. Would you consider lowering the assets because those funds were designated for a specific home expense, let's say due to an insurance claim? And the college can consider that and adjust your information on the FAFSA to potentially lower your student aid index based on the information you're providing. So a lot of times, lowering the SAI that you have requires appealing to the college and providing proof and circumstances that they would be like, okay, you're right. That doesn't actually represent your financial ability to pay. Let's use this information instead.
Is there an income range to be eligible to apply for grants?
Because SAI is based on a number of factors, there's not a set income that would make you eligible or not eligible for different grants. Our recommendation is always apply for financial aid and see what you're eligible for. And so if you are worried or you're like, I don't know if I should fill out the FAFSA, my answer is always try filling out the FAFSA because colleges will use that to determine institutional aid. They might have different requirements than the federal government. The state government has different requirements than the federal government and the colleges. And so there's so many different people who can get financial aid, even if their income puts them above the Pell eligibility range, because financial aid comes from so many different sources.
Can someone apply for a CSS scholarship before applying for FAFSA since it's late this year?
Yeah, so I think that what they're asking is should they fill out the CSS profile, which
Right.
is a certain form, which is a certain form that certain colleges do require. And so that CSS profile is a form built by College Board that a lot of times more competitive private colleges require it because they have more institutional funds to provide. And so my recommendation is absolutely, you want to get that CSS profile submitted as soon as you can and before the FAFSA so that when the FAFSA comes, you can focus on the FAFSA instead. And so absolutely, you can fill that out. It became available October 1st. And so you should be able to access that form today.
So someone said, I might have missed this, but in regards to the 1040, which year are we reporting on FAFSA?
So for the 25-26 FAFSA, you're using the 2023 1040 tax form. And so the year that's used, they call it the prior year tax form that they use. And so 25-26 is the 2023 tax form. If you still need to fill out the 24-25 tax form, it's 2022. Hopefully, though, you don't even really need to think about that because you're able to consent on the FAFSA. The direct data exchange with the IRS pulls that information and puts it on your form and does all of that automatically. So you don't even need to think about what year. But if you do need to manually provide any information for the upcoming FAFSA, it would be the 2023 form.
We have somebody who has a question about guardianship. They have guardianship for a grandchild, but they're in court, but this could be true for others. Are they eligible to file for a FAFSA, or who should they talk to for more information?
So yeah, so the term guardianship is really challenging. So if the child is in a legal guardianship and you are their legal guardian determined by a court, that child is actually going to be considered independent and your information is not required on the form. If you are a guardian of a child, the only way your information ends up on that form is if you are the adoptive parent, the biological or adoptive parent of that child. And so odds are your information should not be included on the FAFSA. If you need, if you want to talk through your specific scenario, what I would say is maybe Kara or Heidi, you can connect them with me and I'm happy to talk through it because that is such a, I don't want to mislead you and give you the wrong information without talking about the specifics, but I'm happy to connect via email to address any questions that you have.
So perhaps the person who posted that, if you can just write to the host and panelists with your email address, and then we can connect you to Brendan. Thank you, Brendan. That's great. A question about 529 accounts. Are they considered parent assets?
Yeah, so it depends. And so if the parent is the owner of the account and the student is the beneficiary, then the parent would include the 529 for that student as an asset on their FAFSA. But let's say a grandparent's the owner of the account and the student's the beneficiary. That 529 account does not show up on the FAFSA. And so it's about who owns the account and then who is the beneficiary of that account. And then the only way that a student would include a 529 account under their assets would be if they are both the owner and beneficiary, if they have their own 529 account that they own, which I've been doing this for over a decade now and I haven't seen that ever. But I guess it is possible.
I love this. Somebody wants extra information for further studies for her own graduate degree because her daughter's loans were forgiven and she's excited to study further. So our employee wants to study further too. So good job. Go back to school. That's great. Another question about whether Roth IRAs should be reported on FAFSA or doesn't need to be reported.
So no retirement accounts should be reported as assets on the FAFSA. So if it's in a retirement account, please don't include it because that will actually make you less eligible for financial aid. And in my experience, colleges aren't asking questions of like, what different accounts did you put in here and finding that? And so just make sure if it's a retirement account, you don't report it.
Great. I think you answered this, but let's just review it again. Can one parent fill out the form 1 year and the other parent another year?
So that's a tough question. So basically, who is a parent on the FAFSA does matter. And so if let's say parents are separated and one parent for the last 12 months provide the majority of the support and that they would be listed on the FAFSA. If the next 12 months, the other parent provided the majority of support, yes, the parents could switch. That I find to be relatively rare. And so that might raise some questions by the college if that does occur, and you might have to provide proof. But yes, that could happen if those qualifications are met in determining who is a parent on the form.
Thank you. Someone has an outstanding Parent Plus loan, but are thinking about going back to school for themselves. Are they eligible for a loan now with still an outstanding parent loan?
Yes. So you can, yeah. So you can, if there's still the plus loan out there that you're repaying, like you can still apply for financial aid and see what you're eligible for. I can't speak to like definitive eligibility because so many other factors go in, but yes, you can apply for financial aid.
Okay. I think that we just reviewed all the questions that were in the chat. I haven't looked over at the Q&A, so I don't know if there were any Q&A questions that seemed to come up numerous times that you want to just review again. Maybe Brendan, Kara, Haiti.
So there are a number of questions that have come in, I think, while we were talking. And so Heidi and Kara, would it make sense just to try and navigate through those with the time remaining?
Sure. I'll just jump in with a question. I can't remember if it's in the Q&A or chat, just referring to the Biden-Harris student loan forgiveness plan that was announced in late 2022. So the Supreme Court did rule that unconstitutional. So that that was discontinued in last year. And so the forgiveness, which you might remember, you applied on a website. It was $10,000 for general student loans and $20,000 for Pell Grants. That's no longer in effect. And there have been a number of other ways that the administration, DOE and the administration have tried to lower either monthly payment plans through a new income-driven repayment plan called SAVE and some other options, but they are also under court review at the moment. So unfortunately, a number of those options are not available at this moment. We are waiting for further news from the courts to see whether or not in the future they might be available again.
Thank you. Did you want to start with the question in the chat? Sorry, in the Q&A.
One question I noted in the Q&A is a question of, are there some challenge, sorry, I just lost the question. Is the expectation that a parent must use the total amount of money in a savings account to pay for college?
That is not the expectation. And so if you look at the back end of the formula, when you list assets on the FAFSA, how those are used are determining SAIs. It doesn't say like, okay, 100% of those assets equals your SAI. It looks at around 5 to 6% of those assets in terms of determining your SAI. So it does not look at, say, like you must include this full amount to help pay for college in determining that student aid index. That expectation can shift with colleges that require the CSS profile and so forth. And like I said, the SAI is not the amount that you pay for college. It's just a number that colleges use to determine financial aid eligibility. But no, there is not that expectation. Parent assets are weighted a lot less in the formula than student assets, which are weighted around, I think it's around like 20% in terms of on the FAFSA. And income is weighted heavier across the board for both. If you look at assets versus income is weighted a lot more in the formula as well.
Okay, just looking at the Q&A starting at the top, can home equity loans be subtracted from the value of the property? Similar to the outstanding mortgage.
Yeah, and so you would want to subtract any debt that's held against that asset to determine the net worth. And so home equity loans would also be included there.
Okay. I'm applying for grad school and sent in my FAFSA, but noticed that the college I graduated and received a degree from said it was withdrawn. I guess you have to go back to that college and say, what's up?
Yeah, Deborah, I think it's the same thing. You should go talk to that college and ask what's going on, because that's weird. And you got to check in to see what they need from you to sort of shift that.
Okay. Once you apply, is there a rep that can look up the status and go over either qualifying payments or any questions that comes up on your application? I assume that sort of might be a PSLF.
Could you repeat that question?
It says, once you apply, is there a rep that can look at status and go over qualifying payments? I'm assuming that's a PSLF qualifying payment as compared to a FAFSA application.
Yeah, to check to see that how many qualifying payments you have, we'd recommend reaching out to your loan servicer or FSA. And that information should be on FSA's website.
And just remind folks what FSA stands for.
Federal Student Aid.
Thank you. Could you repeat the part about the student's FAFSA online account and how info will show there that doesn't show on the parents?
Absolutely. So the FAFSA in itself is the student's application. And so they have access to certain information that the parent doesn't. And so one of the best examples is when the student gets access to their student aid index, a parent will never receive an email telling them what their student aid index is. They need to talk to their student to see what that is. And so there are certain things there. So a parent can't make corrections to certain information that the student entered for themselves on the form. And so it really requires a collaborative effort to see the full FAFSA picture and working with your student and their FSA ID account there. They'll have access to the full form and doing whatever, but the parent has limited access to only information that they entered on the form.
Great. If my child enters college in, oh, I just lost the question, in fall 2026, what year would somebody be using for their SAI, 24 or 25?
So they would be filling out the 26, 27 FAFSA. So I believe they'd be using the 2025 1040 tax form. Please don't quote me on that. I'm trying to do the years in my head, but that is what I think they would be filling out, because their FAFSA, they'd be filling it out in not this upcoming FAFSA, not the next. No, they'd be filling out the following year's FAFSA. So yeah, I believe it's 2025, but once again, I could be wrong here. I'm trying to do the math in my head.
Another question, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Another question that I noticed someone had is does somebody apply for a FAFSA, I just lost it, for a student every year, if she's accepted the first time scholarship, or is it once applied for scholarship for a full 4 years?
So you need to fill out the FAFSA every year that you want to receive financial aid. And that could also pertain to, so the FAFSA needs to be filled out every year. A lot of scholarships, let's say you get an outside scholarship, if it is for multiple years, might require a renewal application every year. Also, colleges that require the CSS profile may require you to fill out that every year. And so financial aid, view it as an annual process. It's usually not a one-time application. It usually requires you to submit a form annually or submit documentation annually across the board.
There was a couple of questions about income to be reported. One about Social Security benefit for a child or trust money for a child.
So Social Security benefits, this depends on whether or not those are included on a tax form and are taxable. And so if it's on a tax form and included in the adjusted gross income, it shows up on the FAFSA. If it is non-taxable and isn't included in adjusted gross income, there's no spot for that to be reported on the FAFSA. In terms of trusts, that is difficult to answer just by saying trust, like when does it, usually if the trust is in the student's a beneficiary of a trust, it needs to be reported as an asset, but there's a lot of complicating factors there that I can't give a definitive answer on that just based on that information.
What's the deadline for FAFSA this year?
So the deadline for the FAFSA versus the deadline that the colleges and states require are two very different things. And so you should submit the FAFSA by the date whenever a college is asking you to submit it. Usually the college has the earliest deadline. Those can be in January, February, March, April. States usually have slightly later deadlines. And then the 25-26 FAFSA will be available to submit until the following June. And so the FAFSA is available for the full 25-26 year, because there could be people filling out the FAFSA in fall 2025 for to attend school in spring 2026, and need to fill out the 25-26 FAFSA. And so that the federal deadline is very, it's a good time away, but the college and state deadlines matter more.
Okay, final question. Can a parent apply for a FAFSA or submit FAFSA for themselves and their child at the same time?
Yes. So there are many people out there who are attending college at the same time as their child, and they both fill out FAFSAs and gotten financial aid to do so. And so yes, that is possible. I do want to amend my response to the what year tax forms are required. So if they're filling it out, so the 25-26 FAFSA is using the 23 tax form. For the 26-27 FAFSA, you're going to be using the 24 tax form. And so my math was a little bit off. My apologies. I was able to recalibrate in my head.
Great, thank you.
So I just want to correct that previous statement.
Well, and thank you so much to our guests. I mean, clearly their knowledge is extraordinary, as well as the resources that DCWP offers to city employees and New Yorkers generally. So I just want to highlight a couple of upcoming events that we have, as well as also we have 2 polls. I'm hoping you could stick around and give us some feedback. So first, I just want to remind you that on October 31st, we have a Workwell 101 webinar. So for you to understand the full range of programming that we offer, as well as how you can get involved. So please come or send your folks. And as you already heard, we have flu clinics happening all around the city. So please get your flu shot, whether at a work site or at a pharmacy or some other doctor's office. Thank you. And next slide. All right, let's launch the poll. Again, we really appreciate your feedback. The first poll. Oh, wait. Okay, first poll. How would you rate the overall quality of this program? Poor, fair, good, very good, or excellent? Great. So if you could just log in. All right, thank you. Looked like more than 50% of you thought that this was very good or excellent, so appreciate that. Our next poll is, did participating in this program increase your knowledge on the topics presented? Yes, no, or I don't know, not applicable. Okay. Thank you so much. It looks like everybody, 97% of you felt that you learned something new. So thank you and congratulations to Brenda and Carrie and Haiti for providing so much information, and Rebecca for helping to answer so many of the questions. Please stay in touch with us. You can see our website here, our email address, follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and there's our YouTube channel where you can find, and this recording will eventually go there, and you can find recordings of many of the other programs that we've co-hosted with DCWP, as well as a host of everything else. So please stay healthy, get well, and take good care of yourself. And thank you for all that you do to keep New York City running. We really do appreciate you. So thank you.